My favorite topic we're going to talk about tonight is lowball offers. Just want to welcome you all to our webinar tonight. I'm the designated broker of Best Choice Realty, and great topic. If this is your first time listening in or joining our webinar, welcome. We'll want to have you just go ahead and use the chat feature if you have questions. I've got some things to share on the screen with all of you. Just want to Shannon and I are going to probably work on this one together so you get a little feel for what we're going through. Even with the marketplace where we're getting multiple offers, we're still seeing lowballs. And so I want to kind of go over some strategy with you, maybe give you some talking points and go through some top producer tips that has worked really well for me and for Shannon and for Candace and Virginia. So let's go ahead and get started. Go to the next slide. So what's prompted me to do this webinar is I got a lowball offer on my listing. I'm happy though, because we've been on the market for several weeks. We did do a price reduction and it did prompt an offer, which is great news. So always like to lead with that I'm working with a seller, it's like good news, bad news. Good news is we have an offer. Bad news, it's the lowball. And so with my particular situation, it was $100,000 off the price and it had contingencies. So here's the email that came across. I removed the some of the information from it so we wouldn't put anybody out there. But the email is kind of templated. A lot of people write offers in this way. But here's the issue that I have with a lowball offer is that I wanted to give you a call to discuss prior to sending, but since it's late on Sunday, I figured at least getting it in your inbox tonight, and feel free to call me in the morning. I guess, we're starting the conversation, but that's not the way I would advise or train you guys on how to deal with a lowball. When you're putting a lowball offer together, if you're representing the buyer, there are some things I will encourage you to do. And one of the things, number one, on $100,000 off in this particular situation, is like almost a 20 to 25% off price reduction after I just reduced the price 25,000. So that's like almost like a no-go, when it comes to a seller deciding whether they're going to accept, reject, or counter. Most sellers would actually reject that altogether. So here her next paragraph, she says, my buyers are offering quite a bit lower. Well, I'd say a lot lower. They are not meaning to offend the sellers, even though she says they are not meaning. However, it's always the but they are basically because of the extensive work that needs to be done, crawl space, pest infestation, deck, window siding. Again, in Washington State, we have rules around inspection and things like that, but they feel that waiving their inspection, they're willing to take on these. So I can understand her point of view and coming lower because there is some work that needs to be done. I would not say it's $100,000 or $125,000 off the price to take care of some of those things. But nonetheless, here we are sitting with an offer. So number one thing you have to do as a listing agent is you must deliver all written offers to the sellers. Now, if you go to text message, I've been getting text messages from some investors that say, hey, I'm going to offer you, click this link or whatnot. That is not a written offer. If it was a written offer sent to you in your email box, on a napkin, yes, that's a written offer. And if it's a written offer where it's not on a purchase and sale agreement that's Washington State approved, it doesn't matter. It still needs to be submitted to the sellers. It's your duty. The law of agency explains your duties as a listing agent, and you are required to submit all written offers to the sellers. So even if it's a lowball, you have to submit it. Now, you can reject it entirely, or you can counter the terms of the price. And that's what we have to determine with the seller. So let's go to the next slide. So here are some of the things that I've used in my past to negotiate with a seller, because you do have to negotiate with your seller as much as you think, oh my gosh, I have to present this. You can use some of this language. I've used all of these bullet points in my past. The one I used with this particular seller would be, would you be open to adjusting your price? Would you be open, even though we just did a price reduction, would you be open to reducing your price by another $25,000? And again, I'm just prompting that seller to consider maybe doing a drop. Another one is how I've used this a lot with the buyer's agents, especially with this buyer's agent. I could have probably called this buyer's agent and said, hey, help me understand how you came up with this price, even though she already did. In her email, the way she came up with that price was factoring in the pest work, that crawl space work that needs to be done, which would not come to probably maybe $3,000-4,000 worth of pest work that needs to be done. So I'm not really coming to an understanding of how she came up with that offering price. But if I did not have that email from her, I could certainly ask her, help me understand how you came up with $100,000 off the price. Maybe that will give you some words that you could use with your seller in properly presenting that offer to them that's low. Another thing I've done is, don't worry, it's natural to feel frustrated when you get a lowball offer. The good news is we have an offer to work with. We just need to work on a creative or a strategic way to counter them or to take some next steps. Another thing I've done is, would it be possible to go back to your husband, or would it be possible to go back to the buyers and offer them to do this or that, giving them choice. Sellers like choice just as much as buyers like choice. And so I often will use that. Would it be possible? Would it be to go back and do this or that? Giving them choice is another bullet point that's worked for me. This one works really well too. It's just by basically taking that same, putting yourself in the camp with that seller and just say, I am so offended by this offer. You know what? I don't think this offer is for you. In fact, in my opinion, let's reject it. But it's up to you. Why don't you sleep on it tonight and get back to me tomorrow? And it's interesting how by you taking that approach with them, this is probably, in fact, I would reject this altogether, but, sleep on it based on your motivation or your, next steps. You may want to consider it, but you're the boss. Makes them feel really, really good about making that next step. And sometimes they'll come up with another thing after they've slept on it. How would you feel? This would be another way I've done this. How would you feel if we didn't get another offer next weekend? That puts a little more pressure on them, so you got to be careful when you use that. But how would you feel is a really good way to phrase something if you're trying to project out and get that seller to move in your direction. How would you feel if this was going to sit on the market all through the spring and summer? Would that might prompt some action from your seller. And the other one that I've used a lot is, most people will consider a small counteroffer. So that might be a strategy that we would take as well. It shows that you're willing to do a deal. And I learned that one from my mother. My mom is like a garage sale nut. She loves garage selling. She loves estate sales. Like, she's like the first one to show up. And sometimes it drives me crazy because she'll actually start the negotiation for some of these, I would say, crap deals, but she'll start, and based on how they negotiate, she'll actually end up finding some really sweet little deals. So I've learned that one with my mom, is sometimes we just need to show that we're willing to do the deal and come off of our price. So in this case, we already dropped 25 grand. If they wanted to show that they were offended, what we may want to do is just only counter offer them $1,000. And that will basically send the message that they need to come up, and kind of come up to the level where we can play ball. But most people will consider a small counteroffer. We'll put them in that category and help you move the ball forward. So I'm going to turn this over to Shannon. So talking about the timing of a lower than list offer. The left side of the screen is a triangle that actually came from one of our managing brokers and top producers. He draws a triangle, and it's very similar to the triangle that you see here. Shannon, you want to explain how you would use this in a situation?
So, I mean, this is really helpful when you're working with buyers that, I had one recently where she goes, you know what? Can we just offer $50,000 off the price? This house is, priced at $450 when it's been on the market for 5 days. And, it's easy just to say, well, I guess we can, especially if you're trying to build rapport with that buyer, but sometimes they need some honesty and they need some numbers to kind of just like know that you know what you're talking about, you know what you're doing, you understand the market. At that type of price point, for that type of buyer that may be saying, can we just do $50,000 less, $100,000 less? And you're like, they're crazy. There's no way. You don't want to say that, right? And that type of circumstance, it's helpful sometimes to show, I mean, this grid that's really helpful. There's two different ways to explain it. You know, buyers, obviously, they want the best price. Sellers obviously want the most money out of it. So it's like, how do you find that happy market price where a buyer is happy with the price and so is the seller? Well, if the home has been on the market for, you know, within its first week, is that primed for a price reduction? And I would argue in most cases it's not. And usually in that case, the one that's on the left actually is really helpful that one of our brokers put together. If you've got a client that's wanting to put together an offer and it's been on the market for 2 weeks, maybe, you know, you want to give some time for the listings to potentially mature, but really it's more helpful on the seller side that when you're priming a seller for a price reduction, this is kind of the percentage. And as a buyer's agent, kind of keep this in mind as well. Market price means you're getting showings and you're getting offers. Sometimes that market price will actually go up with multiple offers, right? So market price is when you're getting showings and offers. When you're 5% overpriced, you're getting showings, but you're not getting the offers. So that might generate low offers. That could be lowball offers. That could be, you know, I'm getting 2 or 3 showings a week. You know, maybe I'm priced right, but we're just waiting for that one buyer. You know, you're lingering probably between the 5% over in the market price if you're getting the showings, but you're not generating the offers. When you have 10% over on price, it's when you're having no showings and you're generating no offers. If you're not getting any activity on the listing, you're likely going to be 10% over. Anything more than 10%, I would say, is very unlikely to happen in this type of marketplace that we're in right now, especially.
And this is all over Washington, and
Yep.
in Idaho, we're seeing this triangle effect of 10% over, 5% over. You've got to get to that point where you're at the market. You're at the sweet spot, as we like to call it, right? You want to be there. The sheet on the right, or the triangle on the right, actually was taken right from Cloud CMA. So it is one of the pages that can be added on. So if you're wanting to get your seller to price right to begin with, that's half your battle, to kind of come together and put the buyer and the seller and make a happy, get some more little circles of happy people, it looks like, on that one graph. But certainly, you know, by less than 15%, we see multiple offers. And that's where it's kind of funny, Shannon, because I find it interesting on social media. I see this a lot where agents were like, oh, I got I got $100,000 over the list price. And I think, you know what, that agent didn't do a good job at pricing. So you got to think about that too. Some of that is very gimmicky, and it makes you really think, if I don't put that out there, I mean, yes, that person's probably going to attract more people, but be careful of what you put out there, because it also makes you look weak as a negotiator too, or as a pricing expert. If you say that I got $150,000 over, the buyers that are very savvy, or the other agents, or, you know, your future listing pool or your future sellers might think you underpriced the house and you left money on the table. So let's go on to the next slide. Talk about the CMA, I believe.
Yeah, and I think too, it's important too, when you've got a client that wants to offer, and so in Rochelle's scenario, she offered earlier, the buyer's agent wants to offer 20% or more less than list price. If I had a buyer that was wanting to do something like that, before I put pen to paper, I would call and talk numbers.
Yes.
Of something like that, rather than wasting everybody's time with, now I have to go to my seller and now they're offended and now they're,
Yep.
You know, it's going to be easier to have that conversation over the phone to begin with.
Yep, and definitely want to have that conversation. Texting is not working. When you get to this stage in the negotiation, we don't text, we're on the phone, we're doing a meeting, we're coming into the office. Those types of, I mean, we're dealing with a sizable amount of money here. In my case, it's $775,000. It's a big deal, and it's people's livelihood. And in my situation, I'm dealing with 2 households, and they are separating. So there's a lot of emotion in play. And also we need to try to make a deal happen. That's our job as a real estate agent. So if I'm a buyer's agent, one of the things I get asked a lot is like, well, Rachelle, how are you able to negotiate so well for your buyers? You know, especially in this marketplace where it's fast moving And my buyer, despite what I tell them, they just want to offer, 20, 25% off of the price. Maybe they're on some late night show. I have had people do this even in 2009, 10, 11, after the recession. People were still trying to offer a substantial amount under the original price in areas or cities across the United States that were actually very fast moving, even in 2009, 10, 11, and 12. There were still buyers and there were still sales happening even in those years. And so what we were coaching the buyers on is, in order to have really good negotiation and to save them a lot of money and get the sellers to move in their direction, lowballing is actually not the best strategy. The best strategy would be to, number one, do a CMA, a buyer CMA, so you can see truly how that price sits. If you're a good listing agent, this becomes very natural for you to do the CMA for a buyer. It's a little bit different in the sense that you're comparing the other homes that you've toured to the one that that you're going to be offering on. And then what you do is you go to InfoSparks or some sort of sales data that you can pull, and you search on InfoSparks by the median percent of last original price. It's a badly priced home, but that's what's going to pull. And notice the graph here on the right that I pulled from InfoSparks. I could easily talk through this graph with somebody, and anywhere in the Northwest MLS territories, even back into 2009, look, if you can see there, we only went down 92, and maybe 91% in 2009. It dropped really, really low. That means that people were getting approximately 8% off of the percent of the original price. Now, the percent of the list price would be better because that would be the reductions have already been done, and that's how it's calculating. There's two graphs, percent of original price and the percent of list price. The percent of the list price is after the price reductions are done. So I could easily just toggle to that bottom. If you can hover over that, Shannon, there's another, it's down, down, down. It's that guy right there, percent of the list price. It's after the price reductions are taken. That would be the median price. And if I did that, you'd find that it actually was higher. It would be like more like 94 or 95, maybe even 96% of the list price. So when you're using this as a way to guide your buyer, if I was the buyer's agent and I was she was on the other foot kind of thing today, and I was advising my client who was wanting to offer $125,000 off of the price after we just reduced the price last weekend, I would pull up a grid on InfoSparks and I would say, you know what, Bob, I'll call him Bob. Bob, you know what? In the entire Northwest MLS, in that particular area of Bonnie Lake, 98391, we have not seen prices go any more than 8% off. And what you're asking us to do is write an offer that is 20 or 25% off. And then you need to pause and you need to let them absorb that, because what I would say would be good negotiation would be to get the seller to counter you. And if we go in 23, 24, 25% off the price, there's a high likelihood that that seller will reject and not counter. And the whole purpose of negotiation is to get the seller to move down. In order for me to get the seller to move down, we need to come up with a realistic price. So we first need to make sure that it's priced right. Once I do that, would you be open? Now, remember, I used those three words. Would you be open to offering more off of like 3% off of where we need to be? So if it's 8% off of the price, why don't we go in at 10 or 11%? How would that feel to you? And just wait for them to acknowledge. I would probably have been able to get an offering price if I use that strategy with my buyer, so that we would have come to about 700, 710 on the offering price. Now, mind you, 775 and 710 is still quite a bit of a distance, but then it would, depending on the seller's motivation, I may be able to get that seller to move in that direction rather than reject altogether. So again, this works with a lot of the motivation that goes into it. So when you're considering to offer, when to tell the seller, sometimes it's okay to tell the seller or tell the buyer, no, let's not waste our time. It's okay to do that. I think a lot of you get in this habit, well, I have to. You can tell the client no, and some clients will appreciate your honesty. Again, we don't want to waste your time let's not put the offer in. I don't, we can certainly do that, but sometimes it's okay to say to the client, no. I mean, in this case, if there's too many repairs that this client needs to have done in order for them to make this house their own, they might be better off to go pay $100,000 more and get something that's brand new. And that might be the best option for this particular buyer. Also, things to consider when you're doing a lowball offer, if you're going to end up writing something that's lower than the listing price or lower substantially like this one, is limit your contingencies. In this case, the buyer's agent did, waive the inspection based on a pre-inspection that we'd already procured for them. But there could have been some contingencies they could have limited. For example, I know that the lender was a relation to this particular buyer. So that contingency could have been diminished. And, from 21 days, we could even probably cut that down to 10 days. That would also show the listing agent, if you're going to lowball them, that while you're offering less on price, you are limiting the contingencies or cutting those timelines down to make it more attractive for that seller. You may want a quicker close. That also a lot of times will put some dollar signs in front of the seller's mind when you limit the contingencies. The other thing you want to consider when you offer is make sure you get yourself a copy of the disclosures. This agent did a good job in getting that disclosures and also had her client review the title report and found out that my particular seller was going through a divorce. So that definitely helps her negotiation. As far as the way she communicated that, I think there were some areas of improvement. And I certainly know that she has not done a buyer CMA, because if she would have seen the actives that we're competing with, and she would have seen the solds in the neighborhood. And those solds, if you were to pull them up today, had only a 2-car garage, no view, and was not in the same ballpark as far as square footage. So it would have been simple 5-10 minute buyer CMA. You can do that on any portal. Realist will actually have pulled the AVM, and it would have given her the range, and that range was not indicative of really what the offer was. How's my time, Shannon? So buyer scripts. So some of you are like, okay, I still want to offer. I mean, this is the time. I mean, why not, right? I mean, the interest rates are kind of starting to creep up. And if you've got buyers that are wanting to get a deal, let's get them out and get them excited about the marketplace, because whenever the interest rates have gone up, what we've seen is there's less buyers that are out there looking. So if you're working with buyers who maybe have taken a break, get them back out there. Tell them that the interest rates have kind of creeped up a little bit and there's less competition this weekend. And if they're still wanting to offer, say, a low ball, help me understand how you came up with that offering price. We've seen 4 properties last weekend. Help me understand how you came up with that price that you want to offer. That works really well with the buyer as well as a seller. Would you be open to adjusting or increasing the price too? And then throw out a number, see if they'll bite. It's interesting because some buyers, they're wanting some guidance from us, and we have facts and reason to think about things like that. So those are some good words that you can use. And then Shannon, want to explain what this is?
Yeah, this is a helpful tool. So for some of you who have sellers that you're working with right now, or you're trying to prep them for a potential market adjustment, maybe we just hit the mark. I mean, especially with the market, how it's going right now, it can change on the weekly. So, I mean, how can we kind of prep our sellers and kind of get ahead of it, so that way they're not shocked, they're not unprepared when we start asking for some help on price. So this is a sample of something I've used, I know other agents do, is just to map it out. When you initially meet with that seller, really putting it down on the calendar when things are going to be occurring. And rather than just, you've got the cleaner and the sign and you got the active and you do the things and all the things on the here, also include when you're going to be having conversation or evaluations of price as well in that calendar. So in that market calendar and whatnot. So that's really helpful, because then it just preps them of, what, this is a conversation we're going to be having at another time, but I want you to be aware when I call you, this is why.
Yeah,
so
always set expectations with sellers.
Yep. And I think we've got, yeah, we do. So here's another sample. This is very detailed.
I asked Shannon to put this. She did a really good job on following up with the seller. And a lot of you I feel like it needs a little bit more conversation or more feedback. And so I asked Shannon, would you mind sharing your email of how she got, how she provided feedback? Again, with the end in mind being, we may have to get that price adjusted again. We don't get it sold. So you want to explain?
Yeah,
what it
so
is?
this is a sample, and we actually have this at probably the base of it in some of our sample email communications that if you guys come in for listing training, we can provide to you. But this is something I just used in the last week or so for a seller, and we're prepping basically for we're on day 8 or 9, so we just used this one, and when it gets to day 14, yeah, we're going to be having a conversation about price. But this particular email, I'll just read the first little bit. It says, see below for the current market update and feedback report. Finally heard back from the buyer's agent from tonight's showing. I included their feedback as well. At this stage of the game, feedback is anticipated, and the stats are looking good. We don't need 10 buyers, we just need one, making them feel comfortable in that way. At this point, I wouldn't advise you make any big change until after we can evaluate how one more weekend goes. We're competing with another home that just came on the market in the same price point that has a garage but is smaller, and they haven't sold yet. I'm watching it closely. I've already been in contact with the agent. We're still within our target days on market, but let's plan to talk after this weekend. Again, preparing for that future conversation about pricing. I attached a copy of the current listing that's displayed on the MLS. I attached, and actually you can see it on the screen, some graphs, as well as a list of all of their competitors that are on the market and within a half a mile from where they are. I included notable stats. So where are we at in terms of days on market? How many showings have we had? How many groups came through from the open houses that came in over the weekend? How many reverse prospecting hits we had? Sellers love Zillow, so I just dip right into it and I give them how many syndication hits, whether it's saved or a hot home on Redfin, things like that. But then also including the feedback. Feedback is helpful, when you're trying to negotiate or really convince the sellers that we may need to improve the price. And so this one's giving feedback, and it's good, it's bad, it's ugly, it's all of it. You just give them all the feedback that you've been getting. Whether that's in text messages, whether that's through the showing time stuff, and basically giving them facts. These are all facts. I can't fudge it. These are all of the facts. So when we have a conversation, it's truly talking about what the next steps are from there.
Great. So this works for analytics. I don't know if you work with them. I do. And Shannon has got a nice little template. You can basically come up with a nice little feedback report and then stats, and then you just need to compile the open house feedback. And plug, tomorrow we're doing open house training. So if you guys want to learn how to do open houses, Candace and Virginia are going to be doing that. Candace, do you want to put the address, or do you want to tell people where we're going tomorrow?
Yes. So tomorrow it's Covington is the location,
Awesome.
and the address. I'll put it in the chat so that if anybody can
like how to do open houses. So I couldn't think of a better team of people. I'm not the best at open houses, but I certainly have learned from Candace and Virginia. They use open houses in both of their businesses and do very, very well with them. So it'll be good to see what they're doing, and they're going to mock it up for you guys tomorrow.
Yeah. While she pulls that up, I think this is just one more plug that I've experienced as an agent with listings recently and on the buyer side too. I don't know what it is recently about our marketplace with our agents, but feedback is so incredibly helpful. So helpful. It helps all of us. We're in a cooperative MLS, and having showing feedback after you've shown a house. I know we get busy. I know it's like you show 10 homes in a day, but it helps all of us when we're dealing with price reductions, we're having longer days on market. If we can get feedback, even simple feedback. So that way we can all help our sellers, which are the ones bringing the inventory. We all want more inventory, right? So help us help you. And if you're a buyer's agent, fill out the showing time requests, give feedback after you've shown the listing. it's all gonna help us all the way down. So,
Make a big push for Best Choice Realty
Please.
agents to do feedbacks, and
I can,
I did it last weekend, Shannon. I showed, well, it's been 2 weekends ago. I showed a manufactured home in a 55 plus, and it was on leased land, and the thing was I think it was 105,000, and that listing agent, he's like, I've been trying to get feedback from anybody, and he got nothing. And you know what? He called me and he's like, you're a busy designated broker, and you still had time to at least tell me that the magenta carpet was a problem and that you would probably offer $10,000 or $15,000 less. That it resonated with him so much that he was able to get his seller to drop the price because of the carpet. My client was just like, didn't like the carpet. And so that was the reason we didn't offer on that house, or we didn't pick that one over another one. So even on something like that, it goes a long way.
Yeah.
It helps in our goodwill out there with our friends out in the industry.
Yep, and I can tell you, even just from this last weekend's showings, I had 1 person out of 10 that actually gave me feedback. And so, for me as a listing agent, I'm having to work 10 times as hard just to get something out of these people saying, did you like it? Did you not? I mean, how did it
Suggestions.
go? And so it's a lot easier to basically convey, is it the floor plan? Is it the carpet? Is it the paint? Is there a weird smell? I mean, what was the key? I had one where literally some buyer's agent bent the key, and I'm like, well, now I know I need to go buy the house and replace that key.
Hard to get in,
Make
yeah.
it easier for all of you buyer's agents out there moving forward. So feedback is so helpful. I can't express it enough. I'll get off my soapbox now.
That's great. I think that was it for slides. Is that right? We have one more slide?
No.
Nope, that's it. Questions you guys have? I think that was straight up at the 6 o'clock hour. Questions about Lowball?
I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Arya.
Yeah, so I have a seller wanting to submit a lowball offer. It's 60,000 less right now, and I couldn't find any comps because it is a standalone, one of these little tiny homes, duplexes. They're calling it like a townhouse, but it's a condo officially, and I can't find anything equivalent. So I don't know how to pull comps on it.
There's always comps. There will always be a comparable sale, even if you have to go back in time and then apply a market adjustment to that number.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
even if you have to go back 2 years, say that there was one that is sold in that complex or down the street, appraisers will make that adjustment too, right? They would go back in time. So if you have trouble, Aria, that's what we're here for. Let's figure out a comparable price, and that gives you a leg up on some of the competition.
Well, and your strategy that we talked about, Aria, is what you do. So if there was a sale in last December, the market has increased, and you do the maybe 3 to 4% addition to what it sold for last year. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. No, great question though. Anything else? So yeah, definitely do a buyer CMA. I think that would be helpful. It's interesting because sometimes listing agents will take the listing and then they'll work their sellers down, and that's okay. But they'll need those are some great listings. If you look at days on market and you kind of do a buyer CMA, you might be able to find some great deals for your clients if they're willing to open themselves up to a wider area or even a different price range. Maybe we didn't pop up into the 800K, but we're going to go ahead and do that. And knowing that we're going to look for days on markets to be pretty high and find an opportunity maybe that fell out on financing, or the appraisal didn't come in. I've been able to find my buyers some deals like that too. So open yourself up, especially if you're working with buyers with limited inventory. You might even call some expireds, right? And just see if you can get them to, to go for just not paying a listing commission and just, getting your buyer a home that way. It's all kinds of strategies you can use to try to find that inventory, that shadow inventory that's out there. Question, let's see, she and I got a few chats that came through.
No, we're all good.
Yeah, they like the scripts, Candace in Virginia. I got somebody that said they're really happy that we provided that today. So yeah,
I actually gave one out today. I used ChatGPT for somebody today who was doing a low offer, and ChatGPT went a long way too.
Yeah.
Turned out really good. I would also say I was in a mastermind recently. So for those of you that are getting feedback and it's not what you want to hear, kind of be kind. I've been told that a lot of people aren't doing feedback because they got beat up by the listing agent for providing negative feedback. And so yeah, I mean, if it's feedback is feedback. So be open to it, whether it's negative or positive. It's not directed to you specifically. So
Don't take it personal. I know.
yeah, don't take it
Business.
personal.
All right.
Also, I'd like to say is that if anybody does need scripts, not only I do come up with them through ChatGPT, but I have books and books of scripts. It's because it's how I was trained. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to me.
Perfect. Yeah, Virginia has a great book that she could probably share the title. If you don't have it, it's a good one.
Yes, I'll share it right now.
Perfect. Put that in the chat if you could. That'd be great. And thanks, Jonathan. Yep. I appreciate info. I'll give you a call later. But again, we have to come to a meeting of the minds, and I think we're gonna get it's amazing when using those words. I think we're gonna get the seller to counter on the offer, and it's gonna be a good one. Hopefully we can get them to come to an agreement. So, all right, have a great week, you guys.